I am celebrating Father's Day with a Boston cream pie cake. And I think you're gonna love it too and think it's just as delicious. So let's make it and see why I love this cake. So Boston cream pie is actually a cake, and it's a simple cake. It's a yellow cake that has pastry cream in the middle, ganache on top. Now, since this was my dad's favorite, Mom would make it every so often for his birthday or a special occasion. And it's honestly a pretty simple, humble cake, but it just is one of those we don't have a lot, right? So I think it's fun to make. And in honor of Dad, I thought it'd be a great one to post around Father's Day. So to start, what we're gonna do is, it's a pretty traditional cake. I keep wanting to say pie because it's Boston cream pie, but it's not a pie, it's a cake, is cream the butter and the sugar. So I have softened butter, which means it is at room temperature for an hour or two. It just depends on your humidity and everything that can change. But you want it to bend and not just break. And that usually means, see how it's pliable, that it's softened. So we're gonna put our butter in there, plus a little bit more. And we let both of these just sit out for a couple hours to make sure they're at that temperature. And then I'm gonna put in my sugar. Now, I do want these to cream together, and I want them to cream together well, meaning until they're light and fluffy. And yes, that actually has a different look. It looks lighter, it looks fluffy. It's working air into the butter sugar mixture, and that's what you want. So if you come in here, you can actually see that this mixture is different. It's lighter, it's fluffy. See how fluffy and light that is? That's beautiful. And that can take a while. So sometimes if your butter isn't as soft, it takes, 3 to 5 minutes. And if you time out 3 to 5 minutes, that is a lot longer than most of us usually leave a cake going. So don't be scared to let it sit if it needs to mixing. So what I have here are some egg yolks. And this is a yellow cake, so it's gonna be a little bit heavier on the egg yolks, which add more richness, adds the beautiful color when you have good quality eggs. See the beautiful color they have? So I'm also gonna add in some whole eggs. So I'm just gonna put those right on top, and then I can add them kind of one at a time. When they're in a bowl, it's a little bit easier. That way with the mixer running, you're not worried about shell that got in there. It's happened to us. It's happened to all of us. And you don't want that to happen if it doesn't have to. So when you crack them into a bowl, it may make it large and make it full, but you can do it. So with the mixer running, I'm gonna add these kind of one at a time, and I want them to incorporate after adding, because that will help it be more homogeneous when it's done. So make sure to scrape the bowl in between these steps, because at the bottom of the bowl, do you see there? Look at that. See how that wasn't even mixed in? That's why you do want to scrape. And it sounds, kind of tedious, but you know what? When you're going to make a homemade cake from scratch, of course you want it to be like this, because you want it to be that good crumb and a good texture. And so we go to these steps to make sure. So I'm gonna just mix that to make sure I have all that mixed in, since we scraped it off the bottom. See that? And now once that's all mixed in, we can move on to our dry ingredients. So for the dry ingredients, we have some flour. I use cake flour. I like cake flour because it has a little bit more of a tender crumb when it's done. It's a little bit lower protein rate for the flour. Now, if you don't have cake flour, one way to mimic it is put a tablespoon of cornstarch in a measuring cup, about a cup if you're gonna do a cup, and then fill the rest up with all-purpose flour. That kind of mimics the cake flour. It's not perfect, but it works in a pinch. Then I'm gonna add some baking powder. So baking powder is obviously going to give us some lift, and it's gonna work with the buttermilk we're gonna add. We're gonna also add in some salt, put that right in there. Then I just like to whisk that together. I think it just helps it be more even, so when we add it into the mixture here of the batter, it's more even. So I also have here some buttermilk that I love buttermilk. It has a richness to it. It works with the baking powder. What we're gonna add to that is some vanilla. That's gonna actually help flavor the cake, give us a little bit of a lift. And then we're gonna add in kind of an odd ingredient, but I like to add a little bit of oil to my cakes. This to me mimics just a neutral oil, one that doesn't have flavor. This to me mimics kind of those box mix or bakery style cake that has such a good moist crumb, but it doesn't have a lot of flavor. So I don't like to add a lot of it. That's what the butter does. So it's just enough to kind of give it a little bit of a, that's good, but still have all the flavor of the butter. So what I'm gonna do is alternatively add these. So I'm gonna add about a third of the dry mixture, half of the milk mixture, another third, the other half, and then finish with the dry. Doing it alternatively, it helps it be more even and give it just a better texture again. That's what we're after. So I'm gonna add about a third of this in there, then we'll start mixing and add the wet. When I'm done, I don't like to overmix. So if I see just a few little lumps in there, that does not scare me. I don't wanna overmix it, and then it can be tough. No one wants a tough cake. So what I have now is all my beautiful batter that we spent some time making. We made sure it was good, we made it fluffy, so we know it's gonna be a good cake. Now, that's why I take the time to do what I'm doing right now, which I know some people think is time consuming. Why show this on a video? But guys, this is what we do at home. We get off all that stuff. We don't wanna waste it. That's goodness. And then I'm gonna wipe off my fingers here. And now we're gonna just split it into two cake pans. And I have I already buttered the sides, but what I do is just take a little bit of that paper left, and I even butter the parchment I have fitted in the bottom. So what the parchment does is help so the cake releases really evenly. That's why I buttered the sides too. But when you butter it, that's why I keep these little papers after I use the butter. When you butter the parchment, it too makes sure that it comes off easily, but also imparts a nice little flavor, nice little finish on it, I think. So I do make sure to do all of it. To me, it's just one of those little steps that can make a difference. So give your cake batter always a final couple turns with your spatula. Again, you just wanna make sure everything is worked in. So make sure everything is together. Give it those nice folds. Look how good that looks though. It's a beautiful color. It's exactly what we want. So now we're gonna split it in between these two. It's a beautiful batter. And you know what? You could weigh this out if you wanna get it exactly. Or since this is just, you know what, for family, for home, you don't have to worry about it. It's whatever you think you need to do. In a bakery, they would weigh them to make sure. We don't have to do that at home. That's the beautiful thing about making all these things at home, is that we don't have to. So I'm gonna eyeball getting these in here and then spread them out evenly. So I'm just smoothing these out to make sure. You don't have to be perfect, but they self-adjust in the oven, but you want them to be somewhat even. You know, it's a good day. I got a little bit on my shirt, so we're all gonna be clean and ready to go when this is done, but we're gonna pop them into our preheated oven. While they're in there baking, we're gonna make the ganache, we're gonna make the pastry cream. It's gonna be a good day. So I have everything in front of me for the pastry cream, which is honestly pretty simple. And I make mine, I don't like to follow rules, so I don't follow the rules really for it, and you're gonna see that. So I start with 4 egg yolks. Now instead of tempering the cream into the egg yolks, I like to just dump it all together, and you're gonna see why. So I have my egg yolks right in there. We're gonna put in some milk. Now I always use whole milk, just like when I'm making or baking a cake, it has more flavor, there's more richness. If you're making a dessert, go all the way, enjoy the dessert. Wanna add in some sugar. Now we're not gonna add in a cloyingly high amount of sugar. It's enough to make it sweet, but we have the cake, we have the ganache. We don't need it to like slap us in the face with sweet. I also wanna add in some salt, a little bit of salt. It of course, you know, will balance out the flavors, bring out the flavor. Then I wanna add in some cornstarch. So I add in enough cornstarch that yes, we have the eggs and they thicken obviously, but we want enough that they continue to thicken. So if that makes sense, they won't kind of give us enough hold, so we add a little bit of something that's gonna help it. Now I'm just gonna whisk this all together. Now usually you would temper, and so that means you would bring the milk and the sugar up to a certain temperature, and then you would slowly ladle that in with the yolks. I don't do that. I do this where I whisk it all together. We're gonna take it over the stove, put it over medium heat, slowly let it come up till it's thickened. Then when it's off heat, we'll add in some cold butter and some vanilla. So I'm gonna turn it on over medium, and you do have to watch this closely since I'm doing it with all in one pot like this, ready to go. You don't want it to burn or the eggs to scramble. We'll strain at the end if there are any lumps. But slowly over now medium heat, I'm just gonna whisk this. And in a few minutes, you at first think nothing's happening, and then all of a sudden, when it kind of warms through and the sugar dissolves and it gets to the right temperature, everything gets thick, and you wanna make sure it gets thick. Then you know it will hold up. You can see it's really starting to thicken, and you don't want it to obviously, you know, get burned, but you wanna take it till it's really starting to pull through. So do you see that? And how it's getting really thick and getting harder for me to whisk? You then at this point take it off the heat, and we finish it up over on the island. So to finish it off, you put in some cold butter. That helps it kind of just get more silky, a little bit more rich, some vanilla. And you put the vanilla in at the end because if you cook vanilla at a high heat, it gets really, well, you know what vanilla gets. It kind of just turns the vanilla off and gets the flavor out of there. So you wanna do it in after all that high heat. So I'm gonna slowly be whisking this until all that butter is melted in, which the cold butter also stops the cooking, and it just gives it that richness. So my pastry cream's all done, and now you just want to pass it through a strainer if you can. It just ensures that there's no lumps and it should be nice and thick. It's like a pudding, and actually it tastes like a pudding, and it's just as good, and you want to eat it all, but don't. This is for the cake. And so we're gonna put it right in here. And then you can either use, your spatula here, or even that whisk at first I sometimes like to do, and just kind of get it to work through with that. And see, what we're doing is just making sure that there's no lumps, and make sure everything gets out, and then you have this silky, smooth, wonderful, creamy pastry cream, which is what you want. You don't want any lumps in that. And you want it to be just like that ultra rich creaminess to it. So make sure you also get anything off the bottom. Like, look at all that. You want all that. So make sure you get all that off. And then what we're gonna do is make a ganache quick on top. So while the cake is cooling, whatever it is, what the ganache will do is actually be kind of like the frosting, but it's a little bit richer. If you've had a ganache, it's chocolate and it's cream. You know it's gonna be good. So what I have here is my chocolate, and I'm just gonna chop it up into somewhat even pieces. Now, the thing here is, if you make it nice and kind of somewhat fine, they don't have to be like shredded, but it does go faster. And so you want your cream hot, and you want to use the heavy cream because, again, you need that fat content for the ganache. So you can see what we're doing here is actually just chopping this up. And you could do this even in a food processor, just don't do it too long, because if chocolate gets too hot in a food processor, it actually starts melting it. And you want the cream to do the melting part. So I'm chopping it up all the way into the corner and making sure that all of it is somewhat broken down. Not perfectly necessarily even, but if you see bigger pieces, do make sure to chop them. Then we can just take this and put it right into our bowl. So you know it's gonna be good because this is where you wanna make sure you have a good chocolate, because all you're tasting here is the chocolate and the cream, which, yes, both of those are really good. But if you use a better quality chocolate, you're gonna have a lot of flavor. So I just brought up to scalding my cream, and you can see it's hot because look at all that steam, and instantly what happens? The chocolate starts dissolving. So it starts melting and just going into the cream. So I let it sit here for a few minutes, and then we'll start stirring it. So this has sat here a few minutes, and you want to make it go about 5 minutes until you know the actual chocolate is melting. Now, at first you're gonna think, well, this is nothing great and it looks broken. The magic happens, I promise. So I like to use a spatula instead of a whisk because I don't want to mix air into it. I just want to stir it so it's this rich, beautiful chocolate mixture, and that's what it becomes. So keep stirring from the middle. And what you're gonna see is this chocolate develop. And that's when it starts mixing and homogenizing with that cream. So as I'm mixing, you're noticing it's getting a little bit thicker, and you're starting to see a little bit more of that chocolate come out. And that's exactly what you want. And it slowly starts mixing together, and look at what's happening. You're getting a richness, you're getting this beautiful velvety chocolate mixture, and that's because we let it sit in that hot cream. Ganache, to me, it really is. It's magical. It's the simplest magic trick there is. So as I'm doing this, I'm also gonna put in some vanilla. This is your one chance to just give it a little bit more heft, a little bit more flavor, especially with chocolate. Vanilla brings out that chocolate, a good quality vanilla, and I wanna stir that into it. And instantly what I'm getting here are these beautiful notes of that chocolate, of that vanilla, and I wanna make sure to get all those edges in there. And so what happens now is, as this sits, and if it's really humid, you may have to put it in the fridge, but as it sits, it solidifies. It gets more thick and it gets more rich, and then that's gonna become our frosting topping. So I have the pastry cream chilling in the fridge. I have the cake cooling. We have the chocolate here that will be on top, and then we just assemble here when it's all ready. So my cakes here are done, they're cool. You want them cool because you don't want the pastry cream to melt, you don't want the ganache to melt more on top. So I have everything ready here to assemble. So you can see here we have these gorgeous cakes. They're really simple cakes. What I love about these, they're versatile. Want to use it for birthday cake? Go ahead. Now I am gonna take a little bit to try to smooth it off, make it a little bit more flat. It doesn't have to be perfect. And honestly, to me, what I hate about doing when I do this is, guys, this to me is the best part. It has so much of like that moisture in it right there. I love that part. And what this is gonna do is just help it sit a little bit more even. Because like I said, we're not covering up everything with frosting, so you don't see and get a cover at all. You wanna see it. And so you want it to be a little bit more, not a huge gap in the middle. And now what we're gonna do is just assemble. So you can see here my pastry cream. I put some saran directly on it. That helps the skin not form. But you can see, look at that gorgeous, luscious pastry cream. And what I like about this, see how thick it is? you need that thickness because this is Boston cream pie, but also you don't want it just to like ooze out all the sides and gush out. You want it to kind of somewhat be solid enough that it stays in the middle. So that's what that cornstarch kind of helps do. My mouth is watering, I'm gonna admit. So I'm gonna smooth this out to an even layer and we'll pop the second layer on. So you can see I didn't push the cream all the way to the edge, and that's because guess what? This layer has some weight. So as it sits there, do you see how it's kind of pushing out slightly? That's what you want. Oh, that's perfect. So my dad died in 2004. So when I make these, I think of him and I think of how much he enjoyed them. He loved anything anyone would bake. So if someone was baking inside, he'd come in from working on the farm, grab a few cookies, be super excited. And he would always be so exaggeratory on how much he liked something just because he loved homemade baked goods. And that's just how he was. So I always think of him when I make these. So I'm gonna put the ganache on and you can see, look at how it has thickened up. Now, if it thickens up too much, like if you have too much time in between and or you wanna make it the day before and put it in the fridge, you can do that. Let it come to room temperature. And if you wanna get it a little softer even, just let it sit or put it in a microwave for just a few seconds at a time. 5 to 8 seconds and stir it, because it doesn't take much, but look. I tell you what, this doesn't look good. I don't know what does. Now, I like to keep the dome on top because to me, that is that homey pie cake look. And so what I wanna do is just kind of slightly get these over a little bit where they want to almost like drip, but look how thick and luscious that is, so it doesn't go too much. Now, I like to give myself just a little bit of excess here in the bowl, so if I need to, I can add more, and then just let it fall as it needs to. So you can see I'm taking a little bit of time and effort here, because this is your one chance to get this to look homemade, but also like really good. And so that's what we're doing here. So we're gonna let it, look at how it's just falling slightly. Okay, I'm gonna finish this up. I'm gonna grab a plate, because I forgot one, and a knife and a fork. We're gonna try this. It doesn't have to be perfect. That's the thing about ganache. It's gonna be good no matter what. You could just pile it on top and kind of spread it lightly. I like it to fall just a little bit. So you can let this sit a little bit. You could even put it in the fridge and then bring it back out to room temperature if you wanna do it a few hours ahead. In fridge, the ganache will get hard. It will solidify more. Same with the pastry cream. So then you wanna let it sit at room temperature, but we're gonna cut into it and we're gonna try it. You know, I think what's amazing is how foods, how cakes, like this one, have memories attached to them. So I remember my dad, and I remember one time I think even my mom saying, "Why do you like that cake so much, Kurt?" And I don't think he really knew. He just for some reason had it once and liked it. And so there we go. But can we say yes to that? That just looks to me pretty good, pretty perfect. It's a big piece, but it's a great one for Father's Day, right? So let's just take a bite. Oh yeah. Why does this work? It's delicious. The rich chocolate ganache, which is rich, is cut with that moist but tender cake, and then the pastry cream offsets the richness of that chocolate. Even though the pastry cream is rich too, it's a different richness. My goodness, is it good though. It plays together. You get the hints of vanilla, you get the creaminess of that pastry cream, and it all just comes together, and it's really good. So what do I hope you do with this? Well, if you want to make something for a father in your life, you could make this. I think that'd be a great thing for Father's Day. If not, make it for yourself. Make it for a loved one, make it for a friend. It's just a great cake, and guess what? Cake brings us together. It puts food on a table in a different way, but it brings us together and we gather around cake. Check my website, wiseguy.com, for this recipe and all my other recipes. And as always, when you share these videos, it means the world to me. It helps me, but it helps everyone else see this is doable. Make some cake.